In this example, I'm going to demonstrate how a customer can engage with a digital expert via email. So in this example, the customer has a payment query. They made a payment to somebody overseas and that person has not received the money. So they've sent an email and the bank has sent back a standard response and included a link for the customer to click on to engage with the digital expert. So the customer will click the link and it will open up the digital expert responsive web interface. This can be opened up on any device that will respond to whatever size it needs to be. They will then ask the digital expert a question. For example, I have a payment query, I have a payment issue, and they can ask that in any way they like, and the digital expert should be able to understand it using the natural language understanding integration with Microsoft Lewis. And the digital expert will then start to ask clarifying questions. Now that it understands it's a payment issue, they need to know, was it into their bank account or out of the bank account? Needs to ask this because they weren't clear in what they had said in the initial question. They also need to confirm how was the payment done. In this case, it was an EFT. And the digital expert now has a good sense of what type of payment it was and has the option to either do an authenticated or non-authenticated process in terms of resolving this issue. I'm going to show you an example of not being authenticated. This is just ultimately going to ask questions and then determine what the outcome should be based on the business rules. So for example, where it was sent to is important, so the country, the rules that govern that. And if we look at the time, so there's obviously business rules around the payment and how long it should take to clear. So the customer can just plug those in, and the digital expert could then ask a few more questions. For example, if they use the standard option, it would then apply that rule and then be able to give an outcome based on those three inputs. So for example, they would need to wait another day because it does take 3 days to clear to Australia. They could then be given a reference number if they did need to follow up on it, and they are then also able to ask another query or get help with something else. So what I'd like to show you now is an authenticated path, and also just something that is a little bit more direct in terms of what the problem is. So in this example, the customer might say, I did an EFT that has not been received. And that is showing you how the natural language understanding can get more information, can drive the conversation forward by not having to ask questions that are explicitly defined within what they've said. So it jumps those additional questions that you saw in the earlier example and goes straight into understanding how you want to proceed with that outbound EFT in terms of resolving it. This example I'm going to show you is that let's authenticate it. Let's use the customer's data. The authentication can work via whatever methodology that the bank needs. So in this case, I'm just going to do a simple OTP, put their mobile number in. They could also potentially put their email address in, could use a two-factor authentication. Whatever the bank's requirements are, the digital expert could align to it. Now, again, it would just like to find out where it was sent to, but now it can also start to leverage the bank's data that it has on the customer. So for example, the bank accounts, it's listed the bank accounts, the date that the payment was made. So this would then start to infer what other rules need to be applied without the customer needing to know whether it was standard or priority. So let's say they made the payment and they remember the reference number was Jenny and it was for 1,000. They could add some of those details. It would still be able to match any of those transactions. Again, using the integration with the banking system, it's then matched on those criteria. And we can see there that was a priority payment and that was done via EFT. They can then confirm that that is the payment that they're querying. That could also be launched from the app on that transaction as well, and that all of that data could then be inferred if it wanted to be deployed as part of the internet banking or the banking app. So, for example, that the rule then comes back, and the outcome is that it needs to wait at least 7 days for the payment to clear. And again, there's a reference number, and they're able to help with something else. All of the information, all of the answers, the questions have been tracked. So if this does need to go to an agent, or somebody needs to pick it up, or they need to put a report on it, they are able to reference that reference number and to get all of the data.